how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're looking at a knife from BEstech, and let me say by way of introduction that I've never had a BEstech that was poorly built. I've always been pretty impressed with their overall quality, with their detent's always dialed in, their action is usually nice, their pivot is usually nice and smooth. But as I look over, this is 2019 as I'm recording this, so maybe if you're watching this a long time from now, this will have changed, but I'm not always super impressed by their designs. In fact, often I kind of look over their lineup and go, nah, nothing really excites me there. And that's been the case for the last couple of years. I've had, by the way, some great BEstechs. The Paladin is amazing. If you've never tried one, it's a great budget knife. You should absolutely pick one up. By the way, I got this from White Mountain Knives, and that's if you're going to get a Paladin, go there. Or if you're going to get one of these. This is the Horus. And I've got to say, I looked through their lineup, and this was the one that really, really jumped out to me as a design that I absolutely adored. Now, there are a number of configurations of this, and I really don't know which one I like best. There's a heavy stonewashed one. There's a few different variations. You can go and check them out over at White Mountain Knives. Use my discount code SHARPSTUFF, and you'll get 10% off. And so there are a couple of different variations. I went with this one because I kind of felt like, yeah, let's do one that's a little dressier. And so this one's kind of nice. Now I will say this, this is a knife that checks a lot of those, high-end, visually interesting knife boxes for me, but it doesn't cost a huge amount of money. So that's another nice thing about these. I think they're like 180 bucks or something like that. Maybe a little bit more, but again, you can save yourself a couple of bucks if you use that discount code. So this is about my favorite BEstech design for 2019. I'm not sure how many more we're going to see on the channel because, as I say, nothing really jumps out at me, although they do have new models coming out all the time. So I'm sure something else will strike my fancy before too long. Let's go ahead and get into some of the details on this guy, beginning with size and weight. And I will say this, as we work our way through the various features here and details, I think you're going to be pretty impressed. I know this is a knife that, initially it was the design that attracted me, but this knife has a lot of stuff going for it. So let's kind of go into this. Size and weight, 8 3/8 overall, 3 9/16 on the blade, 4 13/16 on the handle. Grip area right here is 3 5/8, but then you also have this very generous finger choil, which allows you to choke up a little bit. Both, by the way, very, very comfortable. Weighs in at 5.2 ounces. Now, how does this carry? All I can say is very well, right? This, I guess there are probably some people watching who think 5.2 ounces is just horrible and way too much. I'm definitely not one of those people. This goes in and out of pocket very nicely. The clip is not crazy stiff. So overall, yeah, I really, really like the size and weight on this knife. It's just about right in that sweet spot between 8 and 8.5 inches. Well, it is right in that sweet spot, and it's not too heavy. So overall, it's a real win. We're not on construction yet, but I will show you here if I can. Yeah, there you go. They have milled out some fairly big spaces in that handle to lighten that up a little bit. And so it's kind of neat in that regard, is that it feels in hand a little lighter than you kind of suspect by looking at it. Moving on to the blade, we have S35 VN here with a clip point, flat ground blade. Obviously, it's a black coating on the bevels, satin on the flats, and a little bit of black in that fuller. I do really like the look of this blade, and I have to tell you, the coating here has held up really, really well. And the other thing is it hides stuff. Before filming this, I tried to clean up the blade because I had a little bit of gunk on it, and there's actually still a little bit that you might be able to kind of see it there, but the coating does a really nice job of hiding any imperfections, and I really like that in a knife that I'm going to use. And as you can see, it's held up quite nicely. Now, I want to comment on a question I had about Rockwell hardness. Obviously, I'm not a material sciences lab, so I can't go and test the Rockwell hardness on this, but I can use the knife and strop it up a little bit and see how it feels. And I did not notice any, what would you say, undue softness, or, I didn't feel like this was getting dull way quicker than S35 VN should. I found the performance quite good. So you know, whatever that's worth. Honestly, you know, I had the question. I heard some BEstechs are kind of soft on the steel. Can you kind of confirm or deny? Well, I can't confirm or deny in a technical sense, but I can say in use, this has held an edge quite nicely, at least as well as I would expect S35 VN to do. So to me, it feels like it's heat treated about as well as any other S35 VN that I have messed with. So that's how I would say that. In terms of, you know, being just an all-around functional knife, if you take a quick look here, you can see it's a fairly, come on, focus you. It's a fairly fine point, but it's not crazy. And this grind does allow, or this blade shape does allow a little bit of extra material there. Of course, being a flat grind does that as well. So, well, it's a pretty fine point and fairly thin behind the edge. I think it's a reasonably well-balanced blade that I'm not, you know, some knives, and I'm sure you guys have had them, sometimes you pick it up and you're like, oh man, I've got to be really careful. This blade just seems so fine and so fragile. I certainly don't get that from this particular knife. Let's move on to the action. And here's my overall sort of one-word assessment, okay? I'll go into some details here, but my one-word assessment of the lockup and deployment on this knife is comfortable. Right? It's just really, really easy, really, really natural. The detent is nice. It's not so stiff that your finger gets sore. The lock bar is super easy to access. The bearing pivot is very, very smooth. And so, you know, this is one of those knives where you just pick it up and you go, oh yeah, that's nice. It's just comfortable. It's easy. There's no, I don't know, sometimes I'm sure you've had this experience yourself. You pick up a knife and you go to flip it and there's something that immediately stands out. Either the lock bar tension is really high, or there's a little bit of lock stick, or the detent is really stiff, or, you know, the flipper tab is really sharp. Nothing stands out like that on this knife at all. Everything is just really, really comfortable. And that's what I like to see in in a flipper deployed knife. Just comfortable and easy to use, so that I'm not constantly thinking to myself, oh man, you know, I've got this or that problem with this. The detent isn't quite right, or it doesn't feel smooth, or whatever. Overall, the action here is very, very nice. Now, let's get to the point that I really, really want to talk about. My favorite thing about this knife. Well, I guess partially it's aesthetics. I've already said I really like the look of this. I love the bronze anodizing on the interior and the back spacer. And of course that matches the pocket clip as well as the pivot collar here. But, and I like that an awful lot, but even more than that, I like the feel of this in hand. It is so nice. It's one of those knives, and there are a few of them out there, but when you get this knife in hand, it just feels like it was meant to be. It just really, really molds to your hand and feels excellent. And so for me, the biggest win on this knife is absolutely the ergonomics. And that means that as a user, right, that this knife is going to be fantastic as the kind of knife you're just going to carry and use all the time, because it's just really comfortable. It fits the hand really well. It deploys really easily. You know, just a lot of points go to how functional and practical this knife is. All right, moving on now to one last point that I want to make here, and that is the milling. I love to see that nice milled out handle to save on some weight. You could have saved maybe a little more by even reducing the backspacer. By the way, there's also these carbon fiber inlays here, which I thought looked pretty cool, but if you're not into it, there are other options available. And again, that's going to remove a bit of material and lighten things up just a little bit more. So let's go ahead now that we've talked about all of the features and the ergonomics and performance, and do some comparisons. This is, let's see, what have I got here that's going to work well? First off, let me just bring in a couple of knives more for size comparison, because you're going to be very familiar with them. Here is the Buck 110. This is the SK Blades exclusive, fantastic version of the Buck 110. If you're going to buy a 110, go and talk to Steve over at Silver Knights. This is what you should get. 20 CV on the blade, beautiful canvas micarta and silver bolsters. Love it. The reason I'm really bringing this in is because everyone is familiar with the Buck 110. Everyone knows how big it is. And so you can see that the BEstech is just a hair smaller, but not a whole lot. Let's move on now. Should get some titanium frame locks in here. So there's a Riot Torrent. You guys know this is one of my favorite all-around knives. The detail is just a little more refined here, but you know, you're adding about 150 bucks to the price point by going to this, and you can definitely, you know, you can feel that in the difference, but very nice. Another good option would be a ZT. The ZTs have jumped up quite a bit, making, you know, in my mind, I don't know, you got to kind of question ZT on this one. ZT has jumped up their prices, I think, from like 240. Most of the ZTs that used to be 240 are now like 260. Some of them that were just over 200 are now 240, something like that. I don't have it all straight in my head, but what that does mean is that something like this becomes a lot more attractive. So before, you could look at this BEstech and say, oh, it's $180 or $190. That's pretty good, but for like 20 bucks more, I could get a ZT made in the US, whatever. Well, now, you know, you're 70 or 80 bucks more, making it much less compelling. That said, I'm still a bit of a fan of ZT. I haven't been as impressed with some of their latest offerings, but this one, I will say, is very, very good, and I think reasonably competitive. I think you can probably find one of these for $240, so about 50 bucks more than this. But I would, you know, and I think the quality is pretty well comparable between the two. What else have we got for comparisons here? There's not a whole lot else. I guess when it comes to titanium frame locks, it's worthwhile to bring in a Sabenza. This, of course, is the Doppler, which I find absolutely beautiful. This one may not be sticking around. It's still in the collection, but I may be trading this for an Inkosi with my Carta inlay. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, so those are some comparisons for you. Now, what is my overall take on this knife? Well, look, BEstech builds nice stuff. I really, really like this design, and what really stands out to me about this knife is just the overall comfort level. It fits in hand really well. Everything you touch on this knife just feels comfortable. Everything you want to do with it, locking it, unlocking it, using it, carrying it, it's all comfortable. And so to me, getting a great design in a knife that does everything I want it to do just as I would want it to do it is a win. All right, so there you go, guys. By the way, if, again, I should mention, if you don't like this particular variation, there are at least 2 or 3 others available, and you can go over to White Mountain Knives. There'll be a link in the bottom in the description box to check that out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.